and stuff.
I know. All right, all right. Welcome back to the Black Mind Garden podcast, where we are remapping minds so you can create a life you design. I am so excited, so excited. And we are streaming live. So this is my new thing, guys. If you hadn't noticed, I am doing live podcasts, but it still will end up on your favorite podcast platform.
Nice.
So you will feel free to listen either live or listen later or listen both. Listen both.
Yes.
So, right. Now, I'm super excited because you all know, if you follow me, if you've listened to past podcasts, that I had moved last season to a solo format, and I missed having amazing conversations with amazing people. Amazing conversations with amazing people. So now I'm bringing back the guests, and one of my firsts is one of my favorites, Dr. Donna G, MD, and she is the owner of the company Female Matters. We affectionately call her your Gyne Guru.
Yes.
And we are talking today about how menopause is not the beginning of old age, but the beginning of our best age. And I have to say, I love this topic because although I may not look like it, I'm on the cusp.
It's
So
all
welcome.
good.
Welcome.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here because I keep trying to get off the cusp. But every now and then there's an egg that tries to jump out, and I'm like, really?
Right.
We got to start over again.
Right. Every time you try to get out, they keep pulling you back.
Just trying to pull me back. And I'm getting too old to get pulled back. I'm just like, look, I'm over it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Well, I'm just at the beginning. And so I'm at that stage now. So for the ladies, you all who are in this stage, you know what I'm talking about, where you're just starting to get some irregularity, and you're just starting to get a night sweat or two, or a flash or two, and you're not sleeping. No. Like you used to, waking up multiple times a night, can't go to sleep, laying in the bed, looking at the ceiling, right? And so I'm kind of like at that phase at the beginning where, I know I have a ways to go, right?
Okay.
I have a ways to go. But before we jump right into it, I really want people to know you and who you are, and, why this matters to you. Like, what has had you start Female Matters and become our Gyne Guru?
Okay, that's fair enough. So I'm a physician. I'm an OB-GYN, and I put in 28 years of clinical practice. Probably the last 10 years of that practice, I really had a focus on menopause. I did a lot of bioidentical hormones, and especially when I not discovered like I invented them, but became introduced to bioidentical hormones and really start to get a sense of what it's bringing to the table over other things. It certainly became my preference in terms of what I did for patients that needed and wanted hormonal therapy. But I had plenty of patients who didn't want hormonal therapy. They wanted something herbal. I had already done some training in integrative holistic medicine, so I was comfortable addressing that from that point of view as well. And I had plenty of patients that didn't want anything. They wanted reassurance, or they wanted to get through it naturally and whatnot. And all of that was fine. And one of the hallmarks in my practice was that I meet you where you're at.
I love it.
Okay. So make a decision about what you want to do. And I used to tell my patients that resonates with your spirit.
Yeah.
I'm not here to tell you have to be on hormones, or you have to be on herbs, or you can't be on hormones. None of that. I need to figure out where you're at and what you need. Do you need immediate relief? Do you have significant risk factors? So all of those things, that's what I did in the practice.
Yeah.
The main thing that I did, however, was not pay attention and prioritize my own health. So I've had an autoimmune disorder for 20 years, and it started rearing its ugly head in 2018. And by 2019, I was shutting down the practice and closing clinically.
Right.
So once I finished sleeping the rest of 2019 away and kind of recovering and really getting my bearings, and then the pandemic hit, and I got a chance to love on my only child like a mom in postpartum, where nobody's bothering me. I just have him and me, and I can just love on him. And then once that kind of got old for both of us,
right.
once we had enough loving and bonding,
Right.
it's just time to start getting back to something. And I'm like, I'm too young to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I was never one to want to do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what could I do to leverage my experience and my expertise? And one thing about my patients that always struck me, the main thing they needed was information because they didn't have it.
Yeah.
They didn't know.
Yeah.
They really didn't know. I mean, even some of the basics they didn't know. And it's because there's nobody talking about menopause
Mm-hmm.
really kind of freely and accurately and kind of objectively.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the end of the world. So I'm not into gloom and doom that, oh, you're menopausal and it's horrible and let me get you on hormones and blah, 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 blah. We went through a phase where we put everybody on hormones.
Yeah.
And that was a disaster.
Right.
There were benefits, but it was a disaster.
Yeah.
Then the pendulum swung in the opposite direction. Oh, hormones are going to cause you cancer. Nobody ever get on hormones. So then all the primary care folks stopped giving hormones.
Yeah.
And folks were bouncing into the office. Oh my God, I can't function. I've been on hormones for years. And so it really was an individual thing. So I wanted to bring information.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to bring support.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to put out there really like a resource that you could depend on to just go to and talk about, okay, maybe I need a little bit of information. Maybe I need to hear other women that are going through the same issue.
Right.
I need to know that I'm not by myself, because I think that's the other thing. Mm-hmm. Women assume they're the only ones struggling. Because again, nobody's talking.
Right.
And I assure you, you're not the only one struggling.
Absolutely.
What if you're not struggling and it feels fine? You're not the only one that menopause did not bother you that much.
Mm-hmm.
What if you want to run down the person on the side of the street because you're so angry that day? Unfortunately, you're not the only person that feels like that.
I'm glad to know that.
We don't talk about the mood changes.
We don't.
And you hear people, oh, I'm so emotional, whatnot. How about I could bite off a head every minute and chew on it and be moderately satisfied?
That was my first manifestation. Well, it was like, people who know me and who've known me for a long time know that I'm pretty laid back, mostly like upbeat. But I started having these like rage moments, and I was never really an angry person. And I was like, what is wrong with me? I mean, I thought initially, that I'm family medicine. I'm like, oh, this is an atypical manifestation of depression.
Right.
Maybe I need to look at my life. And it for a long time, I was like, something's wrong with me. Like, what's wrong with me? And then it occurred to me, like, I think what it was is I had a hot flash. And then I was like, oh, wait a second.
Right.
Moods.
Right.
Hot flash.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I always describe it like an out-of-body experience, that I am biting somebody's head off in a situation I would never react like that, especially on a professional level. Exactly. I would never react to whatever got done. And typically it was somebody doing or saying something bonehead. But prior to that, I would never react back to them with that same, or usually much greater, meaner energy. And be out of control. And you it's like that sane part of you is looking out and saying, what are you doing? You need to back off. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't.
Right.
It's like losing control of yourself. So I said sane, and that doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means that sometimes you feel that way because you're not able to control you.
Yes.
In a manner that you were accustomed to controlling you.
That's right.
And it's funny, for me, that was the main symptom that bothered me and derailed me. The hot flashes, I stayed hot all the time. And when I tell you I stayed hot, I felt like I was 140 degrees, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I had control of the thermostats in my house and in my office. And so I literally turned my thermostat down to like 68.
Oh my gosh.
70. I we added sweaters to the uniform of my employees. Because I
Yes.
mean, we're in Florida. Who needs sweaters?
Right.
Well, we needed sweaters when
Right.
Dr. Ivory went through menopause. Let me tell you. And I bought them all space heaters for their workstation.
Oh,
That's how cold my office was.
Right.
And my patients would complain in the waiting room, but we would reassure them. It's like, look, we're all happier if Dr. Ivory is not hot. Once you get in the exam room, there's a heater for you as well. So literally, there were space heaters in the exam room. They can make it as hot as they wanted to. Because I told them, I said, you need to make it comfortable for you because I can come in the room while we do the exam and survive.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came out of the room, it better not be hot in that hall. You know, when I'm sitting in my office, it better not be hot. Right. So that didn't bother me, though. I didn't feel derailed.
Mm-hmm.
But when I screamed at a patient's husband on the phone, now he said something ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the first time a patient's husband was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first time I screamed and hollered and was going back and forth with him. I mean, he even gasped. He was so surprised and shocked that I came back at him like he came at me. It was ridiculous. And that wasn't me. And I'm just like, oh my God, I need to do something because I cannot function like this.
Yeah. Now, you know, I gotta point this out for the people out there who are the ladies who are not doctors. Here we have two doctors, one in OB-GYN this way.
Yes.
Right? Who is sharing this personal experience. Right? And I think it's important because I think sometimes we get put on pedestals like, oh, we don't experience these types of things. We just float through life so easily. And especially the OB-GYNs that know about this stuff, they have all the tools to manage it. But the truth is, you know, our humanity does show from time to time, all the time, every day, 24/7, right? And while we learn, we have the tools to manage it, to deal with it. That doesn't mean we don't experience life.
Right.
And we don't, that's the same thing like with my work in NLP and communication. It's like, just because I teach and know and I talk about emotional intelligence and emotional flexibility, it doesn't mean that I don't fall off the rails sometimes. You know, it's you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed. Those things catch you unexpectedly. Then, so I had to point that out because I think it's very important that as women, that's the culture. That's the, you know, we are a unit, and we have to give each other grace and space and understand that we go through these processes.
And it's funny because I never expected to be on hormones because I never tolerated birth control pills. There's cancers in my family. I didn't feel like I needed it. So it's not that I hadn't gone through menopausal changes previous years, but man, when I tell you, when that incident happened, I was like, okay, something's got to give.
Right.
And I was just like, you know, I need to at least try the bioidentical hormones because I can't keep doing this. That was for sure.
Right.
So I put myself on the same regimen that I put most of my patients on, and it was like a damn miracle.
Yes.
I was like, what? I mean, 3 days later, I was just like, how have I been giving everybody else a miracle pill and I'm not taking it?
Right.
And it was fabulous. I loved it. But I only stayed on hormones about 1.5 years because I was struggling tolerating the progesterone level, which was always the reason I never tolerated birth control pills. There's no way I was going to run around with estrogen and testosterone by itself.
Right.
Because I had a uterus and history of cancer in the family. And so I wasn't going to take that cancer risk.
Right.
And so I stopped the hormones after about 18 months. And did I feel as good off the hormones as I did on them? I didn't. But did I go back to where I was? Nowhere close. You know, it was, I mean, literally, it was nowhere close. And that's an important feature that I always talk to a lot of patients about. They didn't want to go on hormones because they felt like they had to stay on them forever.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I didn't have patients that stayed on them forever, but that's because they chose to stay on them forever.
Right.
And the ones who didn't want to stay on them forever, we talked about I need to get you back to where life is normal and you feel like yourself again.
Right.
That you feel like you're not being derailed, or that you can't predict when you're going to be off the rails versus not.
Right.
And some of us have jobs where that's not okay. You can't come in one day and be off the rails.
That's right.
I can't go operate and be off the rails. You know, I live here in Central Florida on the East Coast. So, I mean, literally, my office was like 2 blocks from the river across from Kennedy Space Center. Some of those ladies, they can't be going in there derailed, you know, being derailed, and you got a major launch and you can't be making mistakes. You know?
Yeah.
If you're an executive secretary for somebody, you can't be getting derailed and you can't manage their schedule. I mean, you know, so there are women whose jobs and realities and lives are such that they can't be getting derailed unpredictably.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So, you know, it's interesting as we talk about this and, you know, looking at the title of the conversation, like it's the beginning of our best age. And I want to kind of like begin to touch on that, because we have, you know, we come into these and whatever age you start. And I think that we used to say in practice, people be like, well, when am I going to start menopause nowadays? Or what age is your mother? I don't know if that's an age old myth or if that's a real thing.
No, it's not a myth. That's real.
It's a real thing. You know, what age did your mother start? Because it's going to be about that time. And I remember when I started having like these symptoms, I had to go back and ask my mom, like, when did it start for you? And it was like early 40s. Like, you know, my son is 8. And I remember he was 2 when I started experiencing them. And I was like, he's 2. Like, I can't be like this with around a 2-year-old. Like, it's just no, because he's 2. Like, he doesn't understand, you know? So I can't be raging in the presence of around, you know, at a 2-year-old. It just doesn't work. So I asked
try having a teenager.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Puberty and menopause was a very interesting combination.
Ooh, I bet. Ooh.
Yes.
Well, I tell you what, there's a whole conversation around motherhood, boy momhood. There's like a whole conversation about that, right?
Whole conversation about boy momhood.
Yes. We will have that conversation. We need to write that down.
Yes, because that's gonna be another session.
It is. I'm writing it down now.
Yes.
Because I think it is an important conversation to talk about how we mother our boys. And I'm a single mother, and I'm very, you know, I'm always very interested in talking with other moms and dads about raising young Black boys to be men and how the various dynamics of that, but not to derail us. You know, I can go down that rabbit hole real fast.
I would be right down there with you.
We're going to call it a to be continued. I wrote it down. We're going to schedule it. We're going to do it in New Year.
Because you know how I am about my junior.
I do. And, you know, I got my 8-year-old, my little mini me.
Yes.
But, you know, this thing about it being the best age. And I think that, so when I started the symptoms and when I realized, oh, this is the beginning of the change. The change. There was a little bit of a grief process that began because, you know, like men tie certain things to their manhood, women tie certain things to their womanhood.
Okay. Society does. It's not just men and women. Society does.
Society, the society, the collective, right? The collective of men, the collective and society and societal that. And so even having been an integrative medicine doc like you, and I don't know if you knew this about me, but that was one of the things that I did in my practice. One of the main things I did in my practice was menopausal women and bioidentical hormone.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. That was like, you know, I was kind of known for that in my little Atlanta community, and men too with low T. Did a lot of that. So to be able to understand, I'm getting ready to go through what my patients went through, and to also understand, but you know what? I gave my patients life back. That means, you know, this is not going to necessarily be the end of a story for me, which is why I love the title that you came up with, which is like, this is the beginning of something new, right? It's a beginning of a transition. Yes. But the question is, what are you transitioning to? Like, you could either see it as transitioning into old womanhood, or right. Or you could see it as, I'm about to be a woman boss, you know?
Yes. And society, part of it is society says that we're old, that now we're old.
Yes, yes.
And a lot of that comes from when the average length of life was in the 60s. So that would be old. Okay, so that's one thing. There's not a huge collective history beyond, I would say, our grandmother and great grandmothers. I would say beyond our grandmothers, where women lived to be this long, this age. Women died from childbirth.
Right.
Women died from cervical cancer at significant ages. And remember, a lot of people died in childhood. So you had to not die from infection in childhood, which was a big deal, even in the US until about the 50s. It was a big deal. And we don't know that. We don't have a collective memory of that. We think of that as third world stuff. That stuff didn't go away in the US until about the 50s.
Wow.
And the 60s. And then you get the vaccines in the 60s and the 70s. And you really reduce the disability and the debility coming out of childhood from infectious disease. And then you get to where I think the early 80s was the lowest maternal mortality the US has ever had.
Right.
It was like 7.8%. And it was extremely low. And for African American women, usually it's about double. And so it was running at 12, 13, 14%. And that's when they had driven all the deliveries they could into hospitals. And believe it or not, that's before we started all eating processed foods and our health parameters went to hell. And so now, 50 years later, we have almost a doubling of maternal mortality rates on average in the US. And that's a big deal. But women used to routinely die in childbirth. Women were having 6 and 8 babies, and the more babies you had, the more risk you had of dying in childbirth. So Pap smears came around in the 50s. Women didn't die from cervical cancer by 40 anymore. And so getting to menopause is a prize.
Yeah.
It is an accomplishment.
Right.
And now we're talking about a life expectancy in our 80s and 90s. So we're talking about another 30 years of life. And now we don't have hormones going up and down.
Right.
We don't have the risks of pregnancy. We have the life experiences to be making choices that don't include me being last on my priority list.
Right.
And now we have a hormonal background that encourages us to start thinking about ourselves.
Yes.
And so that's why it's the best age. So yes, there are a lot of changes. I'm not going to minimize the importance and the intensity of menopause, but I always tell people, go back and think about puberty. I didn't have a bad puberty. I can't tell you when it started and when it really ended. You just know you're in transition, and then at some point you know you're there.
Right.
And I encourage people to think about menopause like that. I've had so many people, like when I did Clubhouse a lot in 2021, so many ladies were, well, am I premenopausal or postmenopausal or perimenopausal? I said, don't try to live up to a label.
Right. I like that.
Because there's no way I can tell you where you are in menopause. I can tell you when you're in transition, and I can tell you when you're likely in the early stages versus the late stages, but I can't give you a date to start and a date that you're going to end. And guess what? It's okay.
Yeah.
Because life doesn't do that.
Right.
What we need to do is get through this transition, understanding where am I going to be when my hormone levels are now low. So my estrogen levels will be low because my body will not manufacture significant amounts of estrogen.
Right.
My progesterone level will be gone because if you don't ovulate, women don't produce progesterone. My testosterone levels, believe it or not, are going to be about the same. But because they're not getting buffered by estrogen and progesterone cycles, then we see more of the effect of testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the hair growth and the acne the hair growth in the face, the acne,
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, some women are having a surge in desire during this time frame. A lot of women are having a decrease in desire, but the testosterone side starts to show.
Right.
Because there's nothing buffering it.
Right.
And for the first time in like 40 years, really for the first time in our lives, because before puberty, we weren't manufacturing hormones.
Yeah.
It's not like men where there are low levels of testosterone, even in boys. Girls do not manufacture hormone until they ovulate. So now we have the same hormone level every day for the next 30 to 40 years. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lovely reframe, right? It's a lovely reframe to think about because, instead of thinking of it as a loss,
right?
What we've essentially done is reframed it to it's simply a new phase.
It is.
And it's a phase where there's a lot more stability.
Yes.
In
or
a lot
if
of ways.
not, we should be getting there.
Right. Yeah. Like in a lot of ways, we're moving towards a different phase, another phase or a phase of stability, physiologically speaking.
Oh, yes.
And also a phase of life.
Yes.
That accompanies that of, that wisdom, the not really caring what other people, feel.
Yes.
That, like there's a wisdom that comes with that phase. And so when we begin to think about what menopause really is, it really is that transition into this wisdom phase of life.
And so many women have never put themselves first, don't have a concept of my needs need to get met. And so they're really thrown off by this phase when we start talking about, well, you need to pay attention to yourself.
Yeah.
Or they're having to make the evolution in their relationships. Their children are gone from home. And so that role of mother changes because the adults don't need you to mother them like they're 5 years old anymore. And are you willing to make that transition?
Yeah.
Do you look to be the grandmother that helps take care of your kid, the grandkids, or the grandmother that now it's my time and I need to travel and I need to do the things that I want to do?
Yeah.
And all of those things are the correct decision if it's the right decision for you. That's why I always use that phrase, making a decision that resonates with your spirit. It's not for me to tell you. It's not for me to tell you what will satisfy yourself emotionally and spiritually in this phase of your life.
Right.
When childbearing is done. It's done. The fertility phase is gone.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason to have those high, constantly cycling hormones. It supports fertility. When that part is done, it doesn't mean your life is over.
Yeah.
And that was a conversation we had with several women because they were just like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I was like, you're more than just what goes in and out of your vagina. And that rocked a couple of ladies that it was just it never occurred to them because that was their identity.
Yeah.
I'm not feminine anymore if I'm not having a period. I can assure you the majority of my patients never thought that, but plenty did.
Right.
And so I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that there is a breadth of outlooks. There is a wide range of attitudes. And we really adopt the attitudes that our moms, that our families give us, the women in our families give us, if they were fortunate enough to live long enough for us to witness them going through the change.
Right.
But they never talked about it. You think I ever had a conversation with my grandmother about menopause?
Listen, I never
periods.
had a conversation with my mom about sex, period.
That didn't happen.
None of that. None of that happened. None of that happened. It's just like, here's some. Now I did get the book, Our Bodies, Our Lives. My mom did give me that book, but I had to read that book. Like, it wasn't like read the book, then have a conversation about it. And I also grew up in in the arena where we had sex ed. So then there was like,
Yes.
I got that piece.
Yes.
But never with my family did I have that conversation.
Yes.
And
I don't remember shame.
Yeah, no.
But there are families where shame is a part of it.
Of course.
You know,
it just was absent. It was just absent and from absent dialogue is what it was.
Because we didn't talk about, because you don't talk about that stuff.
You don't talk about Bruno. No.
Yo, you don't talk about the first time I said vagina at a family function, I thought folks would fall over and die.
Yeah.
And this is when I'm a doctor. At this point, this is me being a physician. And I said something, telling some story about residency. And I said vagina, and one or two people got up and left the room. There were gasps. And I don't have a family that's funny acting about those kind of things, but you start getting into territories where you did not hear conversation about that growing up. And you start these kind of conversations, and then you find out. Because it's silence.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't even know what people think. We just don't talk about it. We say, we don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah.
We don't talk about periods.
We don't talk about
vaginas.
We don't talk about penises. We don't talk
about penises.
We don't talk about sex.
We don't talk about that.
Not until somebody gets pregnant.
And even somebody cheating on somebody or whatever. Right.
We talk about STDs.
No, we don't talk about STDs. Right? I mean, we don't talk about those things in a practical manner. Right. We don't talk about sexual identity.
No.
Let me tell you, this new generation of kids, boy, woo.
They're you gotta admire them, because they're like, what's the word that I want to use? Expressive, like fully expressed. Something that we were not.
Right.
Something that, or at least I can say I grew up not being fully expressed.
Sure.
Being suppressed.
I agree.
That's the history of it, right?
Because it's not like we didn't know people who were homosexual or transgender, or would have been transgender if that was a thing growing up, but you just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Or you whispered about it,
right,
but you didn't really get into any issues about, well, why does he and he always hang out? I'm like, don't worry about it. Stay out of people's business.
Right.
which I think is not a bad thing anyway.
Yeah.
But it wasn't about ridicule. It wasn't about singling people out. But these kids they're exposed to more by the time they're 10 years old than I even knew at 30.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I have a lot of sympathy for them, because they don't have any boundaries, because there are no boundaries that prevented them from being exposed to everything. And that's part of it too. That's when I start realizing I had to explain these things to my child.
Yeah, that's once again,
yes,
a whole nother conversation of raising kids. Look, I want to bring it back to, you help women in this capacity, right? You're our Gyne Guru, and you help people in this capacity. Talk a little bit about, because we're coming up on time, and I want to make sure the audience kind of knows, like, and what is it? How do you help your women, really reframe menopause and really, take a new approach to that?
I was doing a lot of random things. I had been on Clubhouse a lot when we were all stuck at home, and that went very well, and I loved it because we could actually have real conversations, and I could talk about what it is that scares you, what is it that you don't know, and so how do we then translate that into getting the word out to as many women as possible? So I'm starting a community, and we're going to do regular content and then regular calls. But what I want is a support community and information database, because I want you to know what's the normal range for menopause, 45 to 55.
Right.
And yet I also want you to know that 40 to 45 is usually not worrisome, and 55 to 60 is usually not worrisome, because there are plenty of women in that age range. That the average age of menopause is 51 in the US. And so anytime during that time frame, this is when you're going to start having those challenges. That I tell you, what does it mean to be in menopause? It's a transition.
Right.
And how do we define the end of that transition? So we give you that concrete, objective evidence and information. And then we talk about symptoms.
Yeah.
When our hot flash is not menopause. Everything that happens to us in that age range is not just menopause.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I do talk about midlife issues. Hold on a second. Let me grab my water. I thought I had it closer to me. Excuse me with that.
Right.
And so we talk about, we talk about menopause. And then we talk about the fact that when we look at menopause, everything that happens in this age range is not because of hormones.
Yeah.
We're also hitting 50. And I said menopause is our built-in midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Women are going to hit that wall.
Yeah.
Because our hormones are going to hit that wall.
That's right.
Men are going to go through their little midlife crisis whenever they go through it. And some of that is happening because their hormone levels have declined.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's decline over time.
Yeah. And it's a different experience.
And it's a different experience because men age like fine wine, but we act like women are dried up fruit that fell off the tree when they're aging. And we need to change that paradigm.
Right. I was going to say that's the narrative that men age like fine wine. Right. And what we're coming to realize is that they don't age any better or worse than we do. It's just the narrative, right?
And it's the valued in society.
Yeah.
And so we need to change that. You don't see you don't see women actors after 40 unless they're old enough to play somebody's grandmother and get a great wig put on them so they can play an old beat up grandmother. But men can have a full breadth of roles throughout their lives. And we need to change that paradigm. And a lot of that comes from us. So that's one of the reasons I say it's not the beginning of old age. What is your attitude going in?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
What's your expectation going in?
Yeah.
You know, because you just imagine that, number one, you don't feel like you're 60. I still feel like the person I was, it probably in my late 30s, early 40s.
Right.
But the changes physically, you can't ignore.
Right.
And then I'm in a different space in my life. But my self-identity, I don't feel old. Right. And I remember asking my aunt when she was in her 70s, and I asked her, what age does she feel? She's like, I feel 40, except my body is not cooperating. She said, I don't feel old.
Yeah.
Because age really is an attitude. Are you expecting to go sit down somewhere and just die off? Are you expecting to grasp life and make it what's going to be satisfying to you?
That's right.
So I think those are the main things.
I love it. I love it. So now, you know, I feel like we've covered a lot. There's so much more to cover, which is why I want my audience to be able to follow you.
Yes.
So talk to us about, you know, how, first of all, I know you have this Menno swag box.
Yes.
Share a little bit about that, and then share with us if people in the audience want to reach out to you, they want to know about this Menno swag box, they want to be able to see or partake of your services. How do they do that?
Okay, so I'm doing several things. I have been doing a workshop called Menopause Still Got You, where we talk about 3 tips to help those symptoms and make it, and so you start feeling better so you can get back to doing some of the things that you like to do. So that was one thing. Club Me is the membership. And it's open, but all the content isn't there to do everything weekly. But that is one of my big projects because I want that support network, and I want us to start coming off of Facebook. So for now, I want you to follow me at Dr. Donna G, MD on Facebook and on Instagram. And that's where we're going to announce when we have the membership open and ready to have chats we can have spontaneous, believe it or not, talks like this through the membership. It's going to be more private because it's not on Facebook. And then you're not going to be so distracted. That database of information is going to be there in the membership. And then we're going to have the Menno Swag box available during that option, as well as during the Menopause Gotcha workshops. So I want you to follow me on Facebook at Dr. Donna G, MD. Follow me on Instagram at Dr. Donna G, MD, because that's where I announce the next set of links. And we will be doing things over these next 2 weeks at the end of the year so we can get you ready for the new year, because we're going to end this year the way we want next year to start.
Got it.
Okay. And then I'll announce the podcast a little bit later when I have my domain name set up.
All right. So we're going to have this information in our show notes. We're going to have this information in our show notes. And if you're streaming with us here on YouTube, we will put the show notes right in the description. We have a question, and I think this question is going to have is an access to a whole nother show, as well as what can your partner do to help while you go through menopause. I think that's a really great question. That is a very it's like a whole nother episode question type of thing. But I'll let you very briefly.
Yes. That is definitely a whole new episode, because I've had 5 separate requests in the last 3 weeks to talk to partners. So communication, and have your partner understand the fact that you bit his head off does not mean that you don't love him. So he doesn't need to all freak out. Oh, she doesn't love me. She's got a new man. No, it's a transition. You got to roll with it. This is the time to be supportive and roll through this. And yes, I'm going to do a specific workshop for men to help them understand how to be better partners in menopause for women. Because I've had that literally specific request from you're like the 5th different place that I've had that spontaneously be asked. And I know the need is there. And I'm like you, I used to treat my male partners of my patients, and I loved it. So I've spoken to a lot of men about how to understand menopause, what to expect, and then how do you get through this? Because the number one thing patients always talk to me about, you evolve, your relationship evolves. And this is the time where the rubber hits the road. It's not about playing games. You're not worried about having babies anymore. Once you're finished with the menopause, don't get caught in the transition. But how do you now have that fabulous, fantastic, intimate, close, satisfying relationship?
Yeah.
And that's entirely possible.
Absolutely.
So all those things can get addressed.
All right. We'll be looking forward to hearing about your workshop for men on how they can support their partners, their women partners in this transition.
Yes.
And one more time, we're following you on Facebook at Dr. Donna G, MD. Yes.
Correct.
And on Instagram as well.
Yes. DRDONNAG MD. And then my email is drdonnagmd@femalematters.com.
Excellent. All of this will be in the show notes, you all. Excellent. And I encourage you, share this episode, share it with other women who may be going through this, or women or daughters who may have moms who are going through this, or partners who are dealing with this as well.
Or close coworkers.
Share this episode, because I think this is a wealth of information, and we need to be dialoguing about this. So thank you, Dr. Donna G.
My pleasure.
Coming on and dialoguing with me. I can't wait to have by the way, you all, Dr. Donna G and I are doing a crossover podcast. So I'm just gonna leave it on a cliffhanger there. Yes. We're going to be doing a crossover. So soon, and very soon, I will not only be posting this episode, but I will be posting an episode of me being on Dr. Donna G's podcast. So stay tuned on that. All right. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, you all, and share the podcast with others so that they can know that we are out here transforming lives. Again, thank you, Dr. Donna G.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Dr. Maisha, thank you so much, because I love speaking with you and I love the work that you're doing. So I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. All right, y'all. We will see you on the next episode.
Bye-bye.
Bye.